I still remember the smell of jet fuel clinging to my jacket as I dragged my suitcase up the driveway, exhausted after months abroad. The only thing on my mind was stepping into my own house, crashing on my own couch, and finally sleeping in my own bed. But the second I reached the front gate, my stomach dropped. The mailbox wasn't mine anymore. A brand new one stood there, painted white with golden numbers I'd never chosen. The garden, once wild with weeds, was trimmed into perfect square patterns. And worst of all, the front porch, the porch I'd built with my own hands, wasn't empty. A woman I'd never seen before sat in my chair, sipping wine like she had lived there forever. Her sunglasses slid down just enough for me to catch the smirk on her face. "Oh, you must be the guest," she said, waving her glass like a queen greeting a servant. I froze, my keys clutched tight in my fist. Guest? This was my home. My father's photograph still hung in the hallway. My tools were still in the shed, yet here she was, acting like I had stepped onto her property. And then she said the words that made my blood run cold, words that turned fatigue into rage. "Welcome to Willow Creek Estate. I'm the acting HOA president now. And this property is under my management. The last 3 months of my life had been nothing but airports, cheap hotel rooms, and endless contracts. When my company offered me an overseas assignment, I thought it would be a chance to reset, maybe even earn enough to finally clear the mortgage on the house I'd been building into a real home. My father used to say that no matter where you go, a man's real wealth is the roof he comes back to. That house wasn't just timber and drywall to me, it was the anchor of every memory I had left in this town before I left. I double-locked every door, left the utilities on just enough to keep the pipes from freezing, and even asked my neighbor, old Mr. Callahan, to keep an eye out. He was a retired cop, lived 2 houses down, and I trusted him more than anyone else in the neighborhood. He laughed at me for being so cautious, but I knew how fast things could change when you weren't around to defend what was yours. The flight back home felt longer than the one that took me out. My body was there, pressed into a stiff economy seat, but my mind was already racing ahead, picturing the comfort of walking barefoot on my own porch, smelling the cedar panels I had polished by hand, and opening the fridge to find the beer I'd left behind. That small joy carried me through the jet lag, the delays, and the stale food. When the cab dropped me off at the edge of my street, I noticed something was off right away. The first sign was the banner, a wide strip of fabric stretched between 2 streetlights reading "Welcome to Willow Creek Estate" in glossy green letters. I frowned, dragging my suitcase over the curb. There had never been a Willow Creek Estate. My neighborhood was simple, no fancy branding, no gated entrance, just a row of houses built in the 70s and patched up by the stubborn hands of people who believed in staying put. I brushed it off as maybe some realtor's desperate attempt to dress up the area, but the closer I got to my house, the worse it became. Mailboxes painted uniform white, new house numbers nailed into every doorframe, and flyers tucked under doormats talking about mandatory HOA meetings. I stopped dead in my tracks. HOA. We never had a homeowners association here. People prided themselves on that fact. No fees, no neighborhood politics, just each person minding their own lawn. By the time I reached my driveway, my confusion had hardened into something sharper. My house wasn't the same. The lawn I'd left a little overgrown was trimmed into geometric perfection. Flower beds lined the walkway, filled with roses I had never planted. And there on the porch, like a queen staking her claim, sat a woman I would soon come to know too well. Karen. Her hair was bleached to a platinum shine and cut into a bob that barely moved even when the wind caught it. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and leaned back in my chair as though it had molded itself to her shape. A glass of wine glittered in her hand, the kind of casual arrogance only someone truly convinced of their own superiority could pull off. I froze at the foot of the steps. My suitcase handle dug into my palm as I tried to process the scene. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some friendly neighbor waiting for me. This was someone who had moved in. Her sandals rested on a rug I didn't buy. The curtains in the window were floral, not the plain beige ones I left behind. Excuse me. I finally managed. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to peer at me, her lips curling into a smile that felt more like a taunt than a greeting. "Oh, you must be the guest," she said, lifting her glass. "You're early. The showing isn't until next week." Guest, showing. My heart slammed against my ribs. "This is my house," I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended. Her smile didn't falter. In fact, it widened, dripping with the kind of confidence that comes from either knowing something you don't or faking it so well it doesn't matter. "No," she said sweetly, "this is Willow Creek Estate, and as the acting HOA president, I've already filed the paperwork. Squatters' rights, abandoned property statutes, compliance requisition. I don't expect you to understand, but it's all legal." My mouth went dry. I'd heard enough horror stories of squatters twisting the law to their advantage, but hearing it on my own porch, from a stranger sitting in my chair, was something else entirely. I dropped my suitcase and stormed up the steps, my keys clutched like weapons. Before I could even reach the door, she blocked me with a clipboard I hadn't noticed before. Covered in official-looking seals and stapled forms. "Touch this door without my authorization," she hissed, her fake sweetness cracking. "And I'll have you arrested for trespassing on HOA property." HOA property, the words rattled in my skull like loose bolts. This wasn't just a squatter. This was a squatter with ambition, with a plan to turn my absence into her empire. "Where's Callahan?" I demanded. "The neighbor." "Did he see?" "You move in?" Her smirk returned. "Oh, the old man? He's been dealt with. He didn't appreciate the improvements we've made to the neighborhood, so we cited him for non-compliance. I believe he's staying with his daughter now." My fist clenched. Improvements, non-compliance. This was no ordinary con. This was a hostile takeover. Behind her, through the window, I could see movement boxes stacked neatly in the living room, furniture rearranged, and walls painted a color I didn't recognize. She had been here long enough to redecorate. Long enough to convince herself that this was hers. The rage bubbling in my chest threatened to spill over, but I forced myself to breathe. Bursting through the door would only give her more ammunition. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one, but not the kind she expected. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. My thumb hovered over the call button. My eyes locked on hers. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt behind her arrogance. She didn't want the cops involved. Not yet. Not until her lies were cemented into something she could wave in front of a judge. "You do that," she said, her voice tight. "But when they get here, you'll see whose name is on the documents. And I'll enjoy watching you escorted off this property." That was the moment I realized what I was up against. This wasn't just Karen, a trespasser with bad taste in curtains. This was Karen, the self-appointed queen of a fake HOA, using every loophole and scare tactic to seize power. And somehow, while I was gone, she had managed to convince the entire street, or at least silence them, that she was legitimate. I didn't press the call. Not yet. Instead, I stepped back, letting the anger simmer into something sharper resolve. "This isn't over," I said. Her smirk returned in full force, as though she'd already won. "Oh, darling," she purred, "it's only just beginning." I walked back down the driveway, my suitcase bumping against the concrete, my heart hammering with every step. Neighbors' curtains twitched, shadows ducking away from the windows. They had seen me return, but none of them came out. Fear had already settled in this street, and Karen was the source. I didn't even bother calling a cab. I hauled my luggage 2 blocks down to the cheap motel by the gas station and checked in under my own name. The room smelt of bleach and mildew, but at least it was mine. I dropped onto the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling as my mind replayed the scene over. An overshed redecorated my house. I planted roses in my yard, painted over the life I'd built with her own fake empire. But the thing that gnawed at me most wasn't the furniture or the curtains, it was the way she spoke. Calm, smug, like she had already won. Like she'd done this before I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I got up and started walking around the neighborhood again. From the shadows, I watched my own house lit up like a beacon, music spilling faintly through the open windows. She wasn't alone. There were people inside. A group gathered around the dining table, passing papers, clinking glasses. An HOA meeting. In my house I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. She had moved in, declared herself president, and was already running a fake government from my living room. And the worst part, the neighbors were attending. People I had barbecued with, shared tools with, and waved to every morning. They were sitting at my table, nodding along to her lies. The rage nearly drove me across the lawn, but I forced myself back into the shadows. Charging in now would make me the villain. She wanted me to lose control. No, if she was going to play this game with paperwork and false authority, then I'd beat her at her own game. I'd use every ounce of evidence, every contact I had, and every trick in the book to burn her little estate to the ground for the rest of the night. I planned. I took photos of the banner, the mailboxes, and the flyers left on doorsteps. I recorded the sound of voices inside my home. I wrote down the license plates of every car parked in my driveway. And when dawn broke, I knew one thing for certain: Karen had declared war. And I wasn't about to surrender. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, suitcase at my feet, staring at the woman lounging on my porch like she owned it. My house key was in my pocket, my name was still on the deed, but somehow she sat there sipping wine as if I were the intruder. She looked straight at me, her lips curving into a smirk that made my stomach tighten. "Oh, don't look so confused," she said, sliding her sunglasses down just enough to meet my eyes. "Around here I'm in charge now." Her words rang in my head louder than the traffic in the distance. In charge? Since when did my quiet neighborhood have someone in charge? There had never been an HOA here. Everyone used to brag about that fact. And yet, here she was, talking like she ran the place. I took a step forward, my voice sharp. "This is my house. You need to leave right now." She tilted her head, almost amused, like a teacher scolding a child who didn't know the rules. "No," she said simply, tapping a stack of papers on the small table beside her. "This property was abandoned. The HOA board voted, and I claimed it. It's all filed and official. If you don't like it, you can take it up with me." The confidence in her tone sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't nervous, and she wasn't stuttering. She actually believed the lies spilling from her mouth. Or maybe she didn't believe them, but she was daring me to challenge Harry. Clenched the handle of my suitcase tighter, fighting the urge to storm past her. But then she leaned forward, lowering her voice into something colder, more threatening. "Touch that door," she hissed, "and I'll have you arrested for trespassing on HOA property." "HOA property, my property." She spoke the words so casually, so naturally, that I almost questioned myself. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't a crazy neighbor wandering onto my lawn. This was someone who had moved in, planted herself, and built a story so polished it could fool anyone who didn't know the truth. I glanced at the house, and through the window I caught movement boxes stacked neatly in the living room, curtains I didn't recognize, and lights on in every room. She hadn't just broken in. She had taken over, and then, from behind the curtain, I saw a shadow shift. Someone else was inside. She wasn't alone. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. My throat went dry. Neighbors peeked from behind their blinds, quickly ducking away when I met their eyes. No one came to help. No one even opened their door. It was as if the entire street had already chosen sides, and I was on the losing end. I wanted to scream, to yank open that door and throw her out, but something about her calm, calculating smile stopped me cold. She wanted me to be angry. She wanted me to be reckless. Because if I slipped up even once, she'd twist it into proof that I was the trespasser, not Harry. Forced myself to take a step back. Her smirk grew wider, as though my retreat was her. "Victor, this isn't over," I told her, my voice shaking more from rage than fear. Her reply was like ice water poured over fire. "Oh, sweetie," she said, lifting her glass again. "It hasn't even begun." Conflict. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel 5 miles down the highway, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles like they held answers. My home, refuge, was now occupied by a stranger who claimed it belonged to her. Worse, she had the arrogance of someone who believed the entire system was on her side. I didn't bother with breakfast. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the county property records. The deed was still there, in my name, clean and undisputed. Tax payments, up to date, no liens, no foreclosure filings. On paper, my ownership was airtight, so how could she stand there with fake paperwork and act like it was hers? I printed everything, copies of my deed, tax receipts, even satellite images of my backyard over the last 6 years. Every shred of evidence I could find went into a folder. If she wanted a fight, I was ready to start swinging with paper and ink, but by the time I drove back to the neighborhood, something was different. Signs, big white signs with bold black lettering, hammered into the ground at every corner. Silver Creek Estates, HOA jurisdiction. They hadn't been there 2 days ago. Now, overnight, it looked like the entire neighborhood had been swallowed by a phantom HOA. I pulled up to my driveway and froze. Karen was on my porch again, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 men in matching navy windbreakers stood beside her, clipboards in hand. They weren't cops, no badges, no marked cars, but they carried themselves with the smug authority of people who thought uniforms made them untouchable. Karen waved at me like we were old friends. "Ah, the tenant returns," she called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Back from your little vacation?" I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Tenant. That single word sliced through me deeper than any insult. The taller of the 2 men stepped forward. "Sir, you'll need to vacate the premises. This property has been annexed into Silver Creek Estates, HOA. You are in violation of Article 12, unauthorized occupancy of my own house." The absurdity would have been laughable if my blood wasn't boiling. I climbed out of the car, folder in hand, and held it high. "This is my deed. My name is on it." "You and your made-up HOA don't mean a damn thing." Karen's smirk didn't falter. She just tilted her head and gestured toward the men. "Show him the notice." One of them pulled a folded sheet from his clipboard and thrust it at me. I scanned it quickly. County letterheads, stamped signatures, legal jargon thick as mud. At first glance, it looked official. But then my eyes caught the inspector's name at the bottom. John Cressy'd already checked the registry last night. No such inspector existed. I snapped the paper shut and tossed it back. "Nice try. This is a forgery, a bad one." For the first time, Karen's smile flickered, just for a second. Then she recovered, her voice sharp as glass. "You're trespassing, and every second you're here adds to your violation fines. Leave now before we escalate this further." Neighbors were gathering again, curtains twitching. A man mowing his lawn slowed down just enough to listen, then quickly turned away. Not one person spoke up. It was as if Karen had them all hypnotized. Or worse, convinced it was safer to stay silent. I stepped closer to the porch, pointing my finger right at her. "You can forge papers, throw on uniforms, and put up as many fake signs as you want, but you can't erase the truth. This is my home, and the law is going to be on my side." Her eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. Then she leaned down, her voice low enough only I could hear. "The law bends to whoever holds the pen. And right now, that's me." That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just a pushy neighbor. She was playing a bigger game, one that didn't rely on truth but on fear, confusion, and intimidation. If she could create enough chaos, enough doubt, she could drive me out before I even had a chance to fight. I walked away before my rage got the better of me. But I promised myself this war had just begun. 2 nights later, it escalated. I returned, late from gathering more documents, and found my driveway blocked by a strange SUV. My porch light had been replaced with a bright HOA-issued floodlight that bathed the entire front yard in sterile white glare. And plastered across my front door was a massive red sticker. "HOA seized property, entry prohibited." I ripped it down, my hands shaking. Inside, through the window, I saw Karen again. She was hosting what looked like a board meeting. 5 people seated around my dining table, shuffling papers, sipping wine. Acting as though my house was their headquarters, I kicked the door open, the slam echoing like thunder. All heads turned toward me. Karen didn't flinch. She simply leaned back in my chair, her voice cool. "You're interrupting official HOA business." I nearly laughed. "Official? You're sitting in my home drinking Chardonnay like it's a book club. You think paperwork makes this real?" One of the board members, a wiry man with glasses, snapped, Sir, you're in violation of HOA code and trespassing on restricted grounds. Security has been notified. Security, I looked around. No guards. No alarms. Just words meant to scare. May stepped forward, slamming my folder onto the table. You want to play games? Fine, here's the county registry proving your so-called inspector doesn't exist. Here are tax receipts in my name. Here are satellite photos proving I never abandoned this house. Karen reached for the papers, but I yanked them back. No, you don't get to twist these. You don't get to rewrite the truth. Her calm facade cracked. Anger flashed in her eyes. You think this is about truth? It's about control. And you've already lost it. Before I could respond, flashing lights filled the window red and blue, bouncing off the walls. Sirens blared. The real police. For one terrifying second, I thought Karen had actually pulled it off, that she had convinced the county to side with her. But when the officers stepped in, their confusion was obvious. They glanced from Karen to the board around the table. None of it making sense. This is your house, sir? The taller officer asked. Yes, I said firmly, handing over my folder. Every document you need is right here. Karen leapt from her chair, shoving her fake notice into the officer's face. No, this property has been annexed by the HO. He's trespassing. Arrest him. The officer scanned the paper, his brow furrowing. He flipped it over, checking the seal, then he handed it back. This isn't a county document. Where did you even get this? For the first time, Karen stammered. Her confidence faltered. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The officer turned to me again. We'll need to verify everything, but as of right now, you're the documented owner. They have no legal standing here. Karen's face twisted, the mask slipping into pure fury. She pointed at me, her voice rising into a shriek. This isn't over. You don't know who you're dealing with. I looked her dead in the eye. Neither do you. The officers ordered them to leave the property immediately while the investigation continued. Karen stormed past me, her heels stabbing the floor like nails into a coffin. But as she passed, she whispered so low only I could. Here, you may have won this round. But I don't lose, not ever. Her words clung to me like smoke even after the door shut behind them. My house was mine again, but I knew the war was far from finished because Karen wasn't just trying to steal a home. She was building an empire. One fake rule at a time. And she wouldn't stop until she either owned me or I destroyed every lie she had built. I barely slept for 3 nights in a row, each hour replaying Karen's smirk when she told me this wasn't my house, when she hung her fake brass plaque and claimed the estate as her own. But nothing prepared me for what I saw when I finally went back to confront her. The house didn't just look different. It looked occupied like some twisted palace. Candles lined the walkway, string lights glittered across the fence, and cars were packed along the gravel like she was hosting an event. My event. My home? I parked a block down, heart hammering, and walked up with my phone already recording. Music floated through the night. Violins mixed with bass and laughter spilt from inside. I peeked through the bay window. My living room was full of strangers, holding glasses of wine, clinking and cheering like it was their victory. And there she was, standing on the staircase I built with my own hands, wearing a gold shawl, speaking like a queen. This is what a community looks like, she declared, raising her glass. This estate is alive again because of us, not him. Because of me. I pushed the gate open so hard it banged against the post. Heads turned. Conversations died. Karen froze mid-sentence. This is my house, I shouted. My voice cut through the music. Every single one of you is trespassing. Some guests laughed nervously. Others backed away toward the door, but Karen smiled. That same smug smile. That made my skin crawl. Oh, you're back, she said sweetly, like I was some ex who couldn't move on. I told you before you abandoned this place. I saved it. And now the HOA has officially recognized it as part of the community. My community? Your community? I stepped inside. You forged documents, bullied neighbors, filed fake violations, and squatted in my home. That ends tonight. Before she could reply, headlights swept across the yard. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up, followed by another. For a split second, I thought justice had finally caught up. But the deputy who stepped out didn't look like a backup for me. He looked like a backup for her. Karen strutted toward the porch, arms spread wide like she'd summoned them. "Officers, thank you for coming. This man is unstable. He's been stalking me, harassing me, and now he's crashing a private gathering." I held up the deed I'd carried with me everywhere for weeks. "I own this property. My name is Michael. Harrison, you have no right to be here. And she damn well knows it." The deputy took the papers, glanced at them, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, do you have proof of residence?" She pulled out her prop again, that ridiculous PDF with a fake seal, laminated now like it was gospel. He studied it, expression unreadable. The crowd behind her shifted nervously. Someone whispered, "Is this legal?" I could feel the rage boiling in my chest. "That's a forgery. Check the county records. This house has been mine for 15 years. She's lying to you. She's lying to everyone." The deputy sighed, radioed something, then looked back. "Until a judge rules otherwise, this is a civil dispute. We can't forcibly remove her tonight. Both of you need to settle this in court." Karen smirked, lifting her glass again. "See? Even the law agrees. You don't belong here." I wanted, to explode, but then, out of nowhere, one of her guests stepped forward. A man in his 50s, red-faced, clearly drunk but angry. "No," he said loudly. "I'm done pretending. You lied to us, Karen. You told us you owned this house. You made us pay fees, donations, and retreat costs. You used us?" Karen's face was drained of color. "Shut up, Mark," she hissed, but he didn't. He pulled out his phone, scrolling, then held it up. "Look, texts. She told me months ago. The owner was away, and she was squatting. She promised if I supported her, I'd get free use of the pool for life." "She's a con artist," the crowd erupted. Guests shouted, phones came out, and cameras flashed. Within minutes, the party turned into chaos. Some screamed at her, others hurried out in shame. Karen tried to calm them, waving her hands and yelling about energy theft and divine ownership, but it was over. Her illusion shattered right in front of everyone. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "It's done, Karen. Everyone sees you for what you are. You're finished." Her eyes blazed with fury. "You think this is over?" She spat. "I run the HOA now. I can bury you in fines, lawsuits, and violations until you beg me to take this place. I'll make your life hell." I leaned in. "Good, because I'm not leaving again, and I've already buried you in evidence." The deputies, now overwhelmed by the commotion, started taking statements. One even turned to me quietly and said, "Sir, if you really have proof, bring it tomorrow." She's in deep water, and then the knockout blow came. Another neighbor, Cheryl, the yoga mom, who had been too scared before, walked right up with her phone shaking in her hand. "I recorded everything," she whispered. "All her threats, all her bribes." I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Karen froze, her mouth open, no words coming out this time. She looked around at the crowd that had once adored her, at the neighbors she'd controlled with fear, and realized the empire she built on lies had collapsed in a single night. The deputies took her aside, not in cuffs yet, but escorted firmly, her protests drowned out by the buzz of voices, the flashes of phones, and the murmurs of neighbors who finally had the courage to speak. I stood on my porch, and breathed. For the first time in months. The war wasn't legally over, but at that moment, I'd already won. Resolution. The morning after that chaos felt unreal. The sun rose over the estate like it always had, spilling light across the same driveway I once dreaded walking up. But this time there were no strange cars, no party lights, and no strangers lounging in my chairs, just silence. My silence, I unlocked the front door with my own key. It creaked open and the smell hit me, cheap perfume, spilt wine, and smoke. From candles that had burnt all night. The place was a wreck. Broken glass on the floor, footprints across the rugs, wine stains bleeding into the hardwood. But beneath the mess, I saw my home again, my walls, my staircase. My father's photographs are still hanging exactly where I left them. She hadn't managed to erase everything. Not yet. He spent that whole day walking through each room, recording every inch with my phone, gathering every scrap of evidence I could. Fake notices, forged HOA letters, even envelopes where she'd scribbled notes to herself, planning fines, and threats she never got to send. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became Karen hadn't just tried to steal my house. She had built an entire empire of lies on top of it. By the end of the week, I was standing in court. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact now sat on the benches behind me, waiting for her to fall. The judge listened quietly as my lawyer laid out the deed, the mortgage, and the years of tax records in my name. Every word made Karen squirm. She tried to interrupt, waving her laminated paper again, claiming divine rights, HOA authority, and even squatter's law. But this wasn't the party in my living room. This wasn't a crowd she could hypnotize. This was a courtroom, and here truth mattered one by one. The witnesses spoke. Cheryl played the recordings of Karen threatening to fine her into bankruptcy. Mark revealed text messages about free pool use and estate loyalty fees. Another neighbor admitted she'd forced him to pay cash just to park in front of his own home. Each voice was another nail in her coffin. The judge leaned forward, glaring over his glasses. Miss Whitmore, not only do you lack ownership of this property, but your behavior demonstrates fraud, harassment, and unlawful use of HOA authority. Do you have anything to say before I make my ruling? Karen stood trembling, eyes darting between the judge, the crowd, and me. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked small, not powerful, not queenly, just small. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. The gavel came down. This court recognizes Michael Harrison as the sole legal owner of the property. Any claims by Miss Whitmore are dismissed with prejudice. Further civil actions regarding fraud may proceed separately. The room erupted in whispers. Some neighbors sighed with relief. Others clapped quietly. I closed my eyes, exhaling everything I'd held for months. It was over when we walked out. Karen tried to storm past reporters, her sunglasses hiding nothing, her lips pressed tight. Someone shouted, "How much did you scam?" Another yelled, "Where's your estate now?" She didn't answer. She just pushed through the crowd, her empire of fear shattered. The following weeks were slow, but they felt different. I repaired the porch, repainted the fence, restored the garden into something wild again, not the sterile squares she'd forced on it. Neighbors started stopping by, not out of fear, but out of curiosity, offering help, bringing food, even just saying hi. The same people she divided were now coming together, and somehow the scars she left made us stronger. One evening, Cheryl came over with a stack of papers. "We voted today," she said, smiling nervously. "Karen's officially out. The board dissolved. We don't even want an HOA anymore." I laughed for the first time in months, a real laugh. Good, let's never let anyone like her run our lives again. That night I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, sipping a beer, listening to the quiet hum of crickets. My house was mine again. My life was mine again. And though the fight nearly broke me, it taught me something I'd never forget. Monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they smile in broad daylight, waving fake papers and calling themselves presidents. But if you stand your ground long enough, if you refuse to back down, eventually the truth cuts through. Every lying Karen learned that the hard way. And now I ask you, what's the worst HO or neighbor experience you've ever had, and how did you handle it?
This was just one story, but the next one will be even more dramatic. Are you ready? Then you need to subscribe to HOA Stories 87 right now. Like this video, share it with your friends, and hit the bell because the next story might sound a little too close to home.